The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of floating crystal platforms. Representatives from 400 species gathered here to discuss matters of war, trade, and survival. The ceiling displayed a live view of the cosmos, stars burning like scattered diamonds against endless black, in all the centuries of its existence. The council had witnessed empires rise and fall, species evolve and vanish, and wars that consumed entire star systems. Today, Ambassador Kithrix of the Velthari Dominion stood at the central platform, his 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of dominance. His chitinous body gleamed under the artificial lights, and his compound eyes reflected the faces of hundreds of alien diplomats. The Velthari had conquered 17 star systems. Their bioorganic warships were living nightmares that grew and healed and consumed. Their soldiers were bred for violence, engineered for cruelty, and trained to show no mercy. The Dominion claims the system designated Sol 3, Kethrix announced, his voice echoing through translation devices across the chamber. The planet called Earth by its inhabitants. We will begin invasion protocols within 1 standard cycle. He expected silence. He expected the usual resigned acceptance that followed every Velthari territorial declaration. No species challenged the Dominion. Not anymore. Instead, something strange happened. The Selenari representative, an ancient being made of living light who had existed for 12,000 years, began to flicker rapidly. Among the Selenari, this was the equivalent of uncontrolled laughter. The chorus of Vryn, a hive mind species that communicated through clicking sounds, burst into chaotic noise. The granite lords of Kephos, who never showed emotion, actually shifted their massive stone bodies in what could only be described as discomfort. High Arbiter Morith, the elected leader of the council, raised one of his 6 hands for silence. He was an elderly being with skin like aged leather and eyes that had witnessed 10,000 years of galactic history. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of all those years. "Ambassador Kethrix," he said slowly, choosing each word with care, "the council must formally advise against this action." Kethrix's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Advise against? The Dominion does not require advice, we inform. We do not ask permission." "We understand," Morith replied. "We are not attempting to stop you. We are attempting to warn you. Warn us." Kethrix laughed, a harsh sound like metal scraping against stone. "Warn the Dominion? We have crushed species that had achieved faster than light travel before your ancestors crawled from their birth oceans. What warning could possibly concern us?" The Selenari representative dimmed until it was barely visible. "Perhaps you should tell him about the Harrowkind," it said softly. Morith nodded gravely. "The Harrowkind were a warrior species much like your own, Ambassador. Powerful, aggressive, technologically advanced. They discovered Earth approximately 3,000 years ago and decided to claim it. They sent an invasion fleet of 500 ships, and Kethrix demanded. None returned. Not one ship. Not one soldier. Not one signal. The entire Harrowkind fleet simply vanished. When their homeworld sent scouts to investigate, those scouts vanished as well. Within 200 years, the Harrowkind had retreated to a single planet and sealed themselves away from all contact. They died out 4 centuries later, refusing to explain what had happened. The chamber fell silent. Kethrix's compound eyes moved across the faces of the assembled representatives, searching for signs of deception. A legend designed to frighten children. "It is documented fact," Morith replied, "as is the fate of the crystalline hegemony, who attempted conquest of Earth 1,700 years ago, and the Void Stalkers, who tried 800 years after that, and the Crimson Tide, and the Machine Collective, and the Thought Weavers, and 12 other species, whose names have been deliberately erased from our records because the survivors begged us to forget them." He leaned forward, his ancient eyes fixed on the Velthari ambassador. 18 species have attempted to conquer Earth. Ambassador, 18. Some no longer exist. Others have retreated to their homeworlds and refused to discuss what happened. The survivors share one common trait. They are afraid. Not cautious, not wary, but genuinely, deeply afraid. They wake screaming from nightmares about things they will not describe. They have destroyed every record of their attempted invasions. Kethrix forced confidence into his voice. Then they were weak. The Velthari are not weak. The humans are a primitive species, said the chorus of Rin, speaking in their unsettling, unified voice. They have no faster-than-light capability. Their weapons are crude. They still fight among themselves constantly. By every measurement we use, they should be easy prey. Then why? Because measurement fails with humans, the chorus interrupted. Logic fails. Prediction fails. They do not behave as they should. They do not surrender when defeated. They do not despair when outmatched. They do not accept inevitable doom. They simply refuse to lose. The Granite Lord of Kephos spoke for the first time, its voice like an earthquake given words. We watched their world for 1,000 years. We saw them survive ice ages, plagues, and disasters. We saw them destroy each other in wars of unimaginable cruelty, then rebuild everything they had lost. We saw them split atoms, walk on their moon, and send machines to other planets using technology that should not have been capable of such things. It paused, its stone face somehow conveying emotion despite being made of solid rock. They are wrong, Ambassador. They are broken in ways that make them dangerous beyond calculation. They do not know when to quit. They do not understand that some battles cannot be won. And when they are pushed to the edge of extinction, they do not fall. They push back. Kethrix stood in silence for a long moment. The warnings echoed in his mind, but his pride refused to accept them. The Velthari had never been defeated. They had crushed species that controlled star systems, shattered fleets that numbered in the thousands, enslaved populations that counted in the billions. What could a primitive species on a single planet possibly do against such power? The Dominion thanks the Council for its concern, he said finally, his voice cold and formal. We will proceed with the invasion as planned. When Earth falls, we will return to accept your apologies. He turned and strode from the chamber, his armored feet ringing against the crystal floor. Behind him, High Arbiter Moreth sighed heavily. Add the Velthari to the list, he said quietly. The list of species that have been warned? Asked the Selenari. No, Moreth replied, his ancient eyes filled with something that might have been sorrow. The list of species we will be asked to forget. 1 month later, the Velthari invasion fleet entered Earth's solar system. The humans saw them coming, and for the first time in centuries, every nation on Earth stopped fighting each other and began preparing to fight something else. Fleet. Commander Evreth stood at the observation membrane of her flagship, the Eternal Consumption. The ship was alive, a massive creature bred for war. And through its semi-transparent skin, she could see the small blue planet growing larger with each passing hour. Earth, the target. The prized 200 warships followed behind her flagship, spreading across the darkness of space like a swarm of hungry predators. Each ship contained thousands of soldiers bred for combat, its weapons capable of melting cities, and the absolute certainty of victory. The Velthari had done this 100 times before. The process was simple. Arrive. Demonstrate overwhelming power. Crush any resistance. Enslave the population. Harvest the resources. Move on. Evreth had studied the intelligence reports carefully. Earth possessed no energy shields. No faster-than-light communication. No orbital defense platforms. Their most advanced weapons were chemical explosives and primitive nuclear devices. Their militaries were scattered across the planet, divided by political boundaries and constantly fighting each other. This would be easy. Begin initial bombardment, she ordered. Target military installations only. We want them afraid, not extinct. Slaves have value. Corpses do not. The fleet's weapons systems hummed to life. Living artillery chambers pulsed with gathered energy. Targeting membranes focused on 3 locations across Earth's surface, a military base in a region called North America, another in a territory named Russia, and a third in a country called China. The strikes landed perfectly. Columns of fire rose into the atmosphere. Buildings vaporized. Thousands died in seconds. It was precisely calculated destruction. It's designed to demonstrate power while preserving valuable resources. Evreth waited for the expected response: panic, confusion, desperate pleas for mercy. Perhaps some futile attempt at negotiation. What she received instead made her compound. Eyes narrow in confusion. Every electromagnetic frequency from the planet suddenly exploded with activity. Signals bounced between nations, between continents, between satellites. The translation system struggled to keep up with the sheer volume of communication. And then, approximately 6 hours after the first strikes, something unprecedented happened. The humans stopped fighting each other. Intelligence officers reported the change with disbelief in their voices. Nations that had been threatening nuclear war days before were now sharing military resources. Armies that had been enemies for generations were coordinating movements. Political leaders who had refused to speak to each other for decades were holding emergency meetings. One intercepted transmission stood out from the rest. It was between two military commanders, one from America and one from China, nations that had been rivals for over a century. "We'll finish our disagreement later," the American said. "Right now, we have guests." "Agreed," the Chinese commander replied. "Let's show them how humans welcome uninvited visitors." And then came the response that Evreth would remember for the rest of her life. A single transmission, broadcast on every frequency the humans could access, aimed directly at the Velthri fleet. The message was simple, delivered in a tone that carried no fear, no desperation, no plea for mercy. "Is that all you've got?" Evreth ordered a second bombardment. Larger this time. More devastating. She would show these primitive creatures what Velthri power truly meant. But her weapons would not fire. The living systems of the eternal consumption shuddered and groaned. Warning signals erupted across every membrane. The weapons chambers refused to respond. Navigation systems began displaying incorrect coordinates. Life support fluctuated wildly. "What is happening?" Evreth demanded. Her communications officer, a young male named Vreth, worked frantically at his station. His chitin had gone pale with shock. "Commander, something has infiltrated our neural networks. Some kind of attack program. It is spreading through every ship in the fleet." "That is impossible. Our systems are bioorganic. They cannot interface with primitive electronic technology." "Should be impossible," Vreth agreed, his voice shaking. "But they found a way. They traced our communication frequencies, analyzed our signal patterns, and somehow developed a virus that can affect living tissue through electromagnetic transmission." Vreth felt something she had never experienced before. Doubt? How long did that take them? Vreth checked his readings 3 times before answering. Based on the timestamps of their initial scans and the deployment of the virus, ... "Approximately 6 hours, Commander? 6 hours?" In 6 hours, a species that had never encountered alien technology had analyzed Velthri bioorganic systems, developed a compatible attack program, and deployed it successfully across an entire fleet. "That is not possible," Evreth said quietly. "The humans do not seem to care about possible," Vreth replied. The ground invasion launched anyway. Evreth's pride would not allow retreat, and enough transport ships remained functional to deliver soldiers to the surface. 12 million Velthri warriors descended through Earth's atmosphere, landing across 6 continents in coordinated waves. The first reports from the surface were encouraging. Human military installations were being overwhelmed. Cities were falling. The primitive weapons the humans used were causing casualties. Yes. But nothing the Velthri could not absorb. Then the tone of the reports changed. Soldiers began describing enemies that refused to stay dead. Not literally, but effectively. A human unit would be destroyed, scattered, broken, and then reform hours later with new weapons, new tactics, and new ways to cause damage. They learned, they adapted, they improved. Ground Commander Thesik sent increasingly frantic messages from a region called Europe. "They are not fighting like any species we have encountered," he reported. "They do not form defensive lines. They do not protect strategic positions. They disappear when we advance and reappear behind us. They use their own terrain as a weapon. They turn everything into a trap. The casualty rates began climbing. By the end of the first week, the ground forces had taken 300,000 losses. By the end of the second week, that number had doubled. The humans were not winning through superior firepower or advanced technology. They were winning through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat, and they were learning. Every battle taught them something new. Every captured weapon was disassembled and studied. Every Velthory tactic was analyzed and countered. The humans were treating the invasion not as a war, but as an education. And they were very fast learners. Ivreth stood at the observation membrane, watching the planet that was supposed to be her greatest conquest, and finally understood what the Galactic Council had tried to warn them about. The Velthory had invaded a species that did not know how to give up, and now they would pay for that mistake. Ground Commander Desic had fought on 14 worlds before Earth. He had crushed rebellions, broken resistance movements, and shattered the spirits of entire civilizations. His soldiers were the finest the Dominion had ever produced. Bred from birth for war, trained to feel nothing but loyalty and aggression, they had never known defeat. On Earth, they learned what defeat felt like. His division had landed in a temperate region the local intelligence files called Montana. Beautiful country, really. Mountains covered in green forests, wide open valleys, clear rivers running through ancient rock formations. Vesic had seen many worlds, and he could admit this one had a certain rough beauty to it. That beauty hid nightmares. The first engagement, seemed straightforward. A small human settlement, perhaps 2,000 inhabitants. Defended by a few hundred soldiers with primitive projectile weapons, Vesic sent 3,000 warriors to secure it, expecting the operation to take less than an hour. 20 hours later, half those warriors were dead or wounded. The humans did not fight like civilized species. They did not form lines, did not defend fixed positions, did not behave according to any tactical doctrine Desic recognized. They struck from shadows. They attacked from buildings that had been cleared and declared empty. They emerged from underground tunnels that had not appeared on any scan. They killed and vanished like ghosts. Their weapons were primitive but effective. Metal tubes that fired explosive projectiles at incredible speeds. Chemical propellants that drove chunks of lead through Velthory armor designed to withstand plasma fire. The weapons were inaccurate, unreliable, and brutally effective at close range. But the weapons were not what terrified Desic's soldiers. The humans were. One captured warrior, recovered from the battlefield with his mind broken, could only repeat the same words over and over. They smile. When they fight, they smile. They are enjoying this. Desic did not believe it until he saw it himself, during a nighttime assault on an enemy position. He observed a group of human soldiers defending a collapsed building. They were outnumbered 5 to 1. Their ammunition was running low. They had no chance of survival. They were laughing, not hysterical laughter, not the desperate sounds of broken minds, but genuine amusement. They joked with each other between shots. They insulted the Velthory soldiers in creative ways. One of them, moments before being overwhelmed, shouted something that the translator rendered as, "Come on, you ugly bugs! My grandmother fights harder than this." The soldier died fighting. They all died fighting. Not one surrendered. And the next day, a new group of humans appeared to take their place, carrying the same weapons, showing the same fearless aggression, wearing patches that identified them as the dead soldiers' comrades, seeking revenge. The humans called it morale. They believed in each other. They believed in their cause. They believed they could win, even when every logical calculation said otherwise. It was irrational. It was illogical. It was terrifyingly effective. As the weeks passed, the situation grew worse. The humans began using their planet itself as a weapon. One Velthory division was led into a mountain range by what appeared to be a retreating enemy force. The humans had studied Velthory pursuit patterns, predicted their exact movements, and prepared a trap. They triggered something called an avalanche, which was when a mountain decided to fall on you. 500,000 tons of rock and snow buried 3,000 Velthory soldiers in minutes. Another division pursued human. fighters into a swampy region in a continent called South America. Within days, soldiers began dying of infections. Earth's microorganisms were aggressive, adaptive, and utterly foreign to Velthari biology. The humans knew this. They had deliberately retreated through the most disease-ridden terrain they could. They turned their own planet's hostility into a weapon. But the worst damage was psychological. The humans did not just fight. They talked. They learned the Velthari language with disturbing speed and began broadcasting messages to the invading troops. Not threats, not demands, but something far more dangerous offers. Surrender and live, the messages said. We will not harm prisoners. We will feed you, heal your wounds, and eventually return you to your people. We do not want to kill you. We just want you to leave. Some soldiers laughed at these broadcasts. Others listened carefully, and some began to believe them. Vesik found one of his lieutenants weeping in his command tent one night. The warrior was young, barely past his first molt, and his mind was cracking under the strain. They captured Vrek's unit, the lieutenant whispered. All of them. 200 warriors. We intercepted communications about it. Do you know what the humans did to them? The Sec expected to hear tales of torture, of cruelty, of the horrors that conquered species inflicted on their captors. They fed them, the lieutenant said, his voice breaking. They gave them medical treatment. They asked them questions about our culture, our history, our families. They wanted to learn about us. Not to exploit weaknesses, but because they were curious. They were interested in who we are. He looked up at Thesek, with eyes that had lost all understanding of the universe. They are not afraid of us. Every species fears us. But these creatures, these humans, they look at our soldiers, and they see opportunity. They see potential. They have been waiting their entire existence for something like us to arrive. He began laughing, a sound that held no humor. We thought we were the predators. We thought we were coming here to hunt. But we are not the hunter's commander. We never were. Then what are we? Desek asked quietly. The lieutenant met his eyes with a gaze that had seen too much. We are the lesson, he said. We are the example they will show the rest of the galaxy. Look at what happened to the Velthari, they will say. Look at what happens when you threaten Earth. We are not conquerors anymore, Commander. We are a warning. Sec requested orbital extraction that night. High Command denied it, so the war continued. And the humans continued to teach the Velthari what defeat truly meant. By the third week of the invasion, Fleet Commander Evreth had stopped sleeping. Every time she closed her compound eyes, she saw the numbers. 12 million soldiers had made planetfall. 4 million remained combat effective. The rest were dead, wounded, captured, or missing. Some had done something unthinkable for Velthari warriors. They had surrendered voluntarily, and others had done something even worse. They had defected. The first reports of defection seemed impossible. Velthari soldiers switching sides, taking up human weapons, fighting against their own kind. It violated every instinct bred into their species over millions of years. Loyalty to the Dominion was genetic. It's hardwired into their neural chemistry. But the humans had found a way around that too. Captured soldiers. Reported being treated with kindness they had never experienced. Humans talked to them, listened to them, asked about their lives and families and dreams. They shared food, medicine, and something the translators struggled to define. Companionship. The humans genuinely wanted to understand the Velthari, not to exploit them. But because they were curious about who they were, 4 soldiers raised in a culture where weakness meant death and compassion was considered a disease. This treatment was more devastating than any weapon. It showed us things, one defector explained in an intercepted communication. They showed us how they live, how they treat each other, what they believe in. They have a concept they call hope. It means believing that tomorrow can be better than today, even when all evidence says otherwise. They build their entire civilization around this idea. The defector's voice cracked with emotion. We have been conquering for so long that we forgot why we started. The humans reminded us. They reminded us what we lost. Evreth ordered the communications officers to stop recording such transmissions. She did not want her remaining soldiers to hear them. The fleet in orbit faced its own disaster. Human. Spacecraft had begun launching in waves. These were crude vessels, chemically propelled, slow, fragile. They should have been target practice for Velthari weapon systems. They were anything but. In 3 weeks, the humans had studied every engagement, analyzed every beam frequency, cataloged every Velthari response pattern. Their ships now moved in formations specifically designed to exploit blind spots in Velthari targeting systems. Their weapons had been modified to pulse at frequencies that destabilize bioorganic hull integrity. They had reverse-engineered Velthari shield harmonics from debris, collected after battles and learned to punch through them with frightening precision. 3 weeks. It had taken the humans 3 weeks to adapt to technology that was thousands of years more advanced than their own. Science Officer Cathix tried to explain it to Ivreth during one exhausted late-night meeting. "They're not innovating," he said, his voice hollow with shock. "They are iterating. Each generation of their weapons is built on the lessons of the previous generation. Each tactical evolution incorporates what they learned from the last battle. They treat this invasion like a problem to be solved, and they are solving it at a rate that should be mathematically impossible." "How?" Ivreth demanded. "How can they improve so quickly?" "Because they share everything," Cathix replied. "When one human learns something, they immediately transmit that knowledge to all other humans. A pilot in Australia develops a new evasion technique, and within hours, pilots in Europe are using it. A scientist in Japan discovers a weakness in our hull composition, and within days, factories in America are producing weapons to exploit it." He shook his head in disbelief. "They call it the Internet. It is a primitive electronic network that connects their entire species. We thought it was a weakness, a vulnerability we could exploit. We were wrong. It is their greatest strength. They think as one commander. They learn as one. They fight as one." The breaking point came when human forces captured a Velthari communications array intact. Within 2 days, broadcasts began reaching Velthari-occupied territories across the planet, but they were not threats or propaganda. They were offers. "We do not want to destroy you," the human messages said. "We want you to go home. Soldiers who surrender will be fed, healed, and returned to their families. We will send you back with knowledge, with technology, with gifts. We want to be your friends. We have been alone in the universe for so long, and now we finally have neighbors, and you are trying to kill us. This makes us sad, but we have decided to make friends anyway." A defection rate tripled in 1 week. Ivreth watched her invasion crumble and finally understood what the Galactic Council had tried to warn them about. Humans were not dangerous because they were strong. Plenty of species were strong. They were not dangerous because they were intelligent. Many species were intelligent. They were not dangerous because they were ruthless. The galaxy was full of ruthless species. Humans were dangerous because they refused to accept defeat when you beat them. They learned from it. When you broke them, they rebuilt stronger. When you pushed them to the edge of extinction, they did not fall. They pushed back. They adapted. They overcame, and worst of all, they hoped. They believed with irrational certainty that tomorrow would be better than today. They believed that enemies could become friends, that wars could end in peace, that the universe was fundamentally a good place waiting to be discovered. This hope was not weakness. It was their most terrifying weapon, because it meant they never gave up. They never stopped fighting. They never accepted that defeat was permanent. Every other species in the galaxy, and faced with overwhelming force, eventually surrendered. They accepted the reality of their situation. They gave up. Humans did not know how to give up. They did not understand the concept, and that made them the most dangerous species Ivreth had ever encountered. She stood at the observation membrane of her dying flagship, watching the planet that had devoured her fleet, and made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month before. She would request negotiations, not because she believed in peace, Not because she had suddenly developed respect for human values, but because she had finally understood a simple truth that the Galactic Council had tried to explain. You could not conquer humans. You could only survive them. The war ended not with Velthury's surrender, but with something far more devastating to their pride, an invitation. 6 weeks after the invasion began, the remnants of the fleet received a transmission from Earth's unified government. 63 ships remained from the original 200. 4 million soldiers survived from the original 12 million. The greatest military force the Dominion had ever assembled had been reduced to a broken, demoralized shadow of itself, and the humans did not demand surrender. They asked for a meeting. Fleet Commander Evreth descended to the planet's surface under a flag of truce, fully expecting to negotiate terms of humiliating defeat. She would accept whatever conditions the humans demanded. She would sacrifice her own life if necessary to save what remained of her forces. She had already composed her final message to the Dominion, accepting full responsibility for the catastrophe instead. She found herself in a building called the United Nations, seated across a polished wooden table from a group of humans who looked at her with expressions she did not recognize. They were not angry. They were not triumphant. They were not afraid. They were curious. The leader of the human delegation was a woman named Okonkwo, who held a title that translated roughly as Secretary General. She was older, with dark skin and white hair, and she moved with the calm confidence of someone who had faced many challenges and overcome them all. Commander Evreth, she said, her voice warm and measured. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Evreth's mandibles clicked in confusion. Invitation? You have defeated us. You could demand anything you want. Why are we talking? Okonkwo smiled. It was a gentle expression without mockery or cruelty, because we do not want defeated enemies, Commander. We want partners. The word did not translate properly. Evreth's communication device struggled with it, offering several alternatives: allies, companions, collaborators, friends. None of them made sense in this context. I do not understand, she admitted. Okonkwo leaned forward, her dark eyes meeting Evreth's compound gaze. We know why you came here, she said. Resources, territory, slaves, the usual reasons. We have done the same to each other. Throughout our history, we have conquered and been conquered. We have enslaved and been enslaved. We understand the impulse better than you might imagine, and you understand that this is how the universe works. Evreth replied, We understand that this is how the universe has worked, Okonkwo corrected gently. Past tense. We grew past it. It took us thousands of years, millions of deaths, countless horrors, but we eventually learned a simple truth. She spread her hands on the table, a gesture of openness. Conquest is inefficient. Slavery is unsustainable. War is expensive. The resources you spend dominating others could be spent building instead. The enemies you create through cruelty will eventually rise against you. The fear you inspire will eventually turn to hatred, and hatred will eventually turn to rebellion. She paused, letting the words sink in. We offer you something better, Commander. We offer you trade. Evreth felt her understanding of the universe shifting beneath her feet. Trade. Yes. You have technology we want. Faster than light travel, bioorganic engineering, energy systems we have only dreamed of. We have things you might want in return. Agricultural techniques that could feed your colonies more efficiently. Medical advances that could cure diseases your species has accepted as inevitable. Art, music, stories, ideas. Okonkwo smiled again, and this time there was something almost mischievous in it. We are very good at ideas, Commander. It is perhaps our greatest gift. We look at problems and we imagine solutions. We look at enemies and we imagine friends. We look at the universe and we imagine possibilities. Evreth sat in silence for a long moment, processing this impossible offer. And if we refuse? She asked finally. If we return to the Dominion and come back with larger fleets, more soldiers, more weapons? Okonkwo's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. Something harder appeared beneath the warmth. Commander, in 6 weeks, your invasion taught us more about bioorganic engineering than we learned in the previous century. We have already adapted 3 of your weapon systems and improved them. Your fleet's navigation codes are now in our databases. We know the location of your homeworld, your colonies, your supply lines, your defensive weaknesses. She let that sink in. We could destroy you. We choose not to. Because we have learned something your species has not yet discovered. The future belongs to those who build together, not those who tear apart alone. Yvreth thought of the defectors among her soldiers. She thought of the prisoners who had been treated with kindness instead of cruelty. She thought of the messages that had spread through her ranks, offering peace instead of threatening war. She thought of the hope that had infected her troops, spreading like a virus through minds bred for violence. "What do you want from us?" she asked quietly. "Go home," Okonkwo replied. "Tell your Dominion what you found here. Tell them about Earth. Tell them about humans. And tell them that we are ready to welcome them, not as conquerors or slaves, but as neighbors." She stood up from the table and extended her hand. Yvreth recognized the gesture from her intelligence reports. It was called a handshake, symbol of agreement and trust. She reached out with one of her forearms and took the human's small, fragile hand in her armored grip. "The galaxy will not believe this," Yvreth said. "Then we will show them," Okonkwo replied. "One species at a time. One friendship at a time. One act of kindness at a time." 3 years later, the Galactic Council convened to address an unprecedented development. The Velthari. Dominion had formally requested dissolution. Its conquered worlds were being granted independence. Its military was being transformed into a defensive force. And at the center of this transformation was Earth, human. Ambassadors now mediated disputes between species that had been enemies for millennia. Human technology was revolutionizing industries across the sector. Human culture spread like wildfire, from their music to their literature to their strange, infectious optimism. High Arbiter Morith addressed the assembly with a tone of weary resignation. "We warned them," he said. "We warned all of them. But perhaps we used the wrong warning. We said humans were dangerous. We should have said they were contagious." In the gallery, Secretary General Okonkwo caught his eye and raised her glass in a small toast. Her smile was warm and knowing. The Selenari representative flickered with something that might have been amusement. "We have studied humans for thousands of years," it said. "We have watched them survive disasters that should have destroyed them. We have seen them rise from ashes again and again. And we have wondered, what is their secret? What makes them so resilient?" The ancient being turned to face the assembled representatives of 400 species. "Now we know. Their secret is simple. They believe. They believe in tomorrow. They believe in each other. They believe that the universe is fundamentally good and that they have a role to play in making it better." The Selenari paused, its light pulsing thoughtfully. "This belief is irrational. It is unsupported by evidence. It contradicts everything we know about the cold, uncaring nature of existence." Another pause. "But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the universe needed someone foolish enough to believe it could be better, and stubborn enough to make it so." The assembly fell silent, contemplating a future none of them had imagined possible, a future where conquest gave way to cooperation, where enemies became friends, where the darkness between stars was filled not with war, but with connection, a future that was terrifyingly, wonderfully human. And somewhere on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system, 7 billion humans looked up at the stars they had always dreamed of reaching, and smiled. They had finally found what they had been searching for all along. They had found family.